to start, I just got off of a Zoom call a couple of hours ago with the current president of the university, Dr. Frank. Was talking to us, the arts and science faculty. So it's a huge meeting with dozens of us, and everyone from the university leadership was there. And among the things he talked about, was the decision to open the campus up again. And he sent out a video today where he talked about a lot of the protocols and testing and new scientific knowledge, and explained to us what's going to be happening at the campus. But part of it, he talked about, and he also talked about the fiduciary responsibility our board of trustees has and the duty he has as president to keep the university going. So we had a wide-ranging discussion. But at the end, he talked about what I asked you to return to talk to me about, which is about, believe it or not, he mentioned World War II. He mentioned John Lewis and how a young man in his early 20s was asked to deliver, to basically bring the civil rights movement to light. He talked about how the generation that too many are quick to dismiss as students that wouldn't be, I'm trying to see to sort of get his quote, and I can't find it here in the notes I took, but the premise is too many are too quick to dismiss the commitment that a young generation, a generation of 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 21-year-olds, even 26-year-old graduate students, we're too ready to dismiss the fact that they won't rise to the challenge of addressing the issue of our time. When all we have in history, and I remember when I was in law school, I was so impressed with the students in Czechoslovakia who were tearing the hammer and sickle out of the flag in 1989 as the Eastern Bloc came tumbling down. So the president of the university today basically said that we had a duty and we would be failing our societal duty to educate had we taken the easy route and just have these kids come back when the coast was clear. And that he thought that, again, with all the clinical science, and there's now a chief medical officer at the university, there's testing all the time, there's contact tracing, there's all this work he's doing. But he thought that it was okay for us to trust our students to do right by us. And I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about that. And I also wanted to talk to you about trying to find ways of inspiring our students through your wisdom in a way that we can encourage them, reinforce them, challenge them to meet this moment in time. Are you willing to have that conversation with me?
Sure.
Great.
Glad to.
So, Dr. Butler, first of all, let's just, I mean, you have a 94-year-old history of all the work you've done. And out of all those moments in time, and I mean, they're significant, you built the Butler Center, you helped address the issues of race, you hired our first African-American administrators, you were at the cutting edge of where our university was during those points in time in the past few decades. But all the things I want to talk about, including your meetings with the guy who said the buck stops here, right? The meetings with Truman, all I want to talk to you is about William Butler, the 17-year-old who enlisted to go to World War II. Tell me a little bit about that and what that was like and why you assumed that challenge. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. Let me go back a little bit. I was born and raised in Robinson, Illinois, a small little town of 4,500 people, a rural community. And I lived there through my junior year in high school. My high school class was only about 115 students. And then my dad and my family moved to Newark, Ohio, a city of 50,000 people, which is a lunch bucket community. And Dad took over Butler Bakery, which my grandfather, William Butler, started in 1895 Well, the bakery lasted for 50 years, but when I was overseas during World War II, the bakery closed because of a lack of bakers and trucks and tires and gasoline and all the things that were necessary for the bakery to use to stay alive. Well, before we moved there, and this was my senior year in high school. Now I've moved from a little rural community where practically everybody was white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, very few Catholics, no blacks, and I grew up with that environment. And then I moved to Ohio, and my senior class was now about 350 students. And there were black students, there were Catholic students, there were Protestant students. And so I'm now into a new environment that I'd never experienced before. Well, after Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese on December the 7th, 1941, I was very, very emotionally upset with the Japanese. Obviously, this, I think everybody was, but I was determined that I should enlist in the military. And so I tried to persuade my parents to sign the necessary papers for me to do so. But they wouldn't do that until I graduated from high school. Well, I was still 17 when I graduated from high school, and so they signed the necessary papers, and I elected to enlist in the Navy because I was a pretty good swimmer, and I thought maybe I could just swim out of any trouble that came along. Little did I realize how wrong I was, but I enlisted in the Navy and immediately sent to Chicago at Great Lakes Naval Station, where I learned, I was there about, about 8 weeks, learning squad right, squad left, and marching, how to stand at parade rest without feigning, how to stand guard duty at night without going to sleep, how to fire an M1 rifle. And then after that, I was placed on a train headed for Treasure Island, California. I got to Treasure Island, only there a few days, when they put me on board a Liberty ship. Had never been out before. This was its maiden voyage. And so we set sail with some 5,000 troops on board, Marines and Navy personnel. Well, I remember sailing past Hawaii, but we didn't stop. We just kept on going. Fortunately, I ran into a good friend from Robinson, Illinois, who was in the Marines. He was 2 years older than I was, and he was on that ship.
Oh.
And so we used to carry newspapers together, and all the younger kids looked up to him because he was 2 years older, and his name was Andy Plunkett. He later became superintendent of public schools for Robinson and so on, but he was in the Marine Corps, and he had been in the combat, sent home for rehab, and then sent back out again, and was going back into the islands to fight the Japanese. Well, he told me, he said, once we cross the equator and the meridian at the same time, there will be an initiation on board ship, and you will be initiated. And that means they're going to cut your hair and it's going to be sloppy. They're going to paddle you. They're going to dunk you in water, all kinds of things. He said, well, let me cut your hair for you. so it doesn't get all whacked away. So he did that. And then he also taught me how to slip into the chow line at night with him for a second time. And so we did. And on this one night, unfortunately, poisoned ham was served. Well, we got a double dose of it because we had gone in the chow line twice, got awfully sick. With me, it settled in my stomach. With Andy, it settled in his heart. And they found him in the hull of the ship unconscious, took him to sick bay. And the next day, the doctor told him that he would never come that close to dying again, as he did that last night. With me, God. I survived the upset. Medical personnel came around, gave us shots to give us what was necessary. But we lost a Marine who managed to get to topside and to get fresh air, and in his sickness fell overboard and he was never found.
Well,
so we went on. The ship finally ended up in New Guinea, in Milne Bay. Well, my orders were to disembark from the ship. And so in order to do that, I could see the island in the background, the trees, the palm trees, but everything was rainy and muddy and terrible. So in order to go from ship to shore, we had to throw our sea bags over the side of the ship onto a barge below, and then climb down rope ladders to get on the barge, and then we'd get our sea bag and get into a smaller boat, and then they would take us into land. Well, my sea bag hit that barge and bounced off into the ocean. And they came around with a hook and managed to pull it out, throw it back on the barge, but it was soaked to the place where it was too heavy for me to pick up. So once we got to shore, all I could do was just drag it through the mud and the water and finally get to the tent that I was billeted in. Well, anyway, I had to throw away all those clothes and ended up wearing my jungle outfit. And I was there for about 3 months. Every now and then a Japanese plane would fly over and drop a nuisance bomb. You couldn't go to the latrine at night because the latrine was located on the edge of the camp, and the jungle took place there. And this is where Japanese snipers were located. So you just have to stay in your tent all night. And it rained so much that very often I'd wake up and my boots would be floating around in water in the morning. And so I had to deal with some jungle rot on my feet. And finally I got word that I was going to be transferred. I didn't know where. I got on this other ship, and that ship went unescorted across the Coral Sea down to Brisbane, Australia. Now, I had gone now from the hell of the earth to Brisbane, Australia, which was like in heaven. And I was in Brisbane for about a year, and my duties there dealt with, I was assigned to a radio pool, which meant that we had all kinds of communication equipment, radio, sonar, harbor defense equipment, radar, and we supplied the combat troops up in the islands with all this equipment. And as the war moved north, it was more difficult to supply the troops with the necessary equipment. So we got orders to box everything up in these two warehouses, big warehouses, put them on board this one ship, and away we sailed again. And I didn't know where we were going. We were just going north. And finally, we ended up in the Philippines, in Manila Bay. And at that time, Manila Bay was a graveyard of ships. You could just see all these masts sticking out from the bombings. And from there, we went on to Civic Bay, which was about 60 miles north of Manila. At that time, it was just a naval base. A little town by the name of Olongapu was located there. Olongapu only had a few hundred people. And today it's a modern city of 250,000 people. And that's where, well, the Seabees had built new warehouses for us and to unload all of this communications equipment, which we did, and we were able to supply very quickly then the combat troops whatever they needed. Well, that's where I was when President Truman ordered the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs on Japan. And that was some relief and experience that the war had finally come to an end. And now, at that time, I was the youngest in our outfit. We had about 100 people in our outfit. But I was the youngest. I was a kid that came in at age 18 by then. And now I'm 20. And it was based on a point system, how you rotated back to the United States, where you were located, whether you're in combat, how long you were there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, everybody else was gone. And finally, the officer called me in and said, look, you're the last one of the group, the old group. Everybody else is new coming in from the States. We need you with your experience. We'll jump rank you if you would be willing to re-enlist in the Navy for 4 years and jump you to Chief Petty Officer. Well, that seemed very, very enticing to me. Here I was, 20 years old, and I would arrive at the top of my profession at the age of 20. But the more I thought about it, I thought, guys, there's got to be something more in life than reaching the top of your profession at the age of 20. And the GI Bill had been passed in 1945, which was a bill to help veterans adjust to life. And a part of that bill was a free education for if you decided to go to college. So I turned it down and came back and was assigned to another ship in Seattle to decommission that ship. And then once that was done, I was sent back to Great Lakes to get my discharge, an honorable discharge. And so after the discharge, I hitchhiked my way back to Newark, Ohio, where my family was. And went back to the military board and let them know I'm back and honorable discharge and so on. And we received what was known in those days as being a member of the 5220 Club. Now that meant that you were entitled to 52 weeks of $20 a week, unless you found a job. And if you found a job, well, then those payments would stop. Well, every time I was interviewed for a job, I told them that I was going to college in September, so they would turn me down. And so I ended up receiving my 5220 payments until I went to college. And then I went to a high university, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, that history-making move of yours and every other American who answered that call to duty, I think, is the history I want to focus on. Right. At this moment, the university has, again, according to our president and his video talk this morning, the unifying goal is to avoid a generalized outbreak at the university. We are in the middle of a pandemic, right? And that's what these conversations are about. They're trying to take and understand this moment. And I know way at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a certain disconnect between the seriousness of this and in many of our younger populations, partially because of some information about young people not being as vulnerable as olders. Just recently, we have seen teenagers die here in Florida from this pandemic. It is a disease that is yet not fully known. It is a virus that is brand new, and we don't know what the consequences are. You didn't know what the consequences could ultimately be because you were in the middle of a war, you know. In 1941, the Pacific Theater opened, but there was another theater in the entire continent of Europe that was in serious and desperate situation, kind of like we are right now in the world. And you just knew as a 17-year-old that you had to act. You just couldn't stay home. You still had a bakery. The bakery, hadn't closed down yet. You had just moved into this urban space, and all of a sudden, you're getting food poisoning at the belly of a ship, and not being able to go to a bathroom at night because you could get shot.
Absolutely.
So you as a kid, I mean, you weren't even an adult yet. You were a child. You as a kid answered this call and took that responsibility seriously. And your generation, Dr. Butler, you're lucky enough to still be around. There's so many of those who served alongside you may have not died by falling off that boat as it made its way down to New Guinea, but they certainly over time have passed. And that great generation of ours, the one that democracy and the entire world is grateful to, has always been a generation that we look at in awe for the sacrifice, right? For your sacrifice. You literally, had your feet were rotten, you're living in a flooded cage, and you're being shot at. Yeah, I'm sure you haven't mentioned mosquitoes, but I'm sure they were there with you too. So my point is, you sacrificed a lot. And it's not to make you individually safer, it's to make your nation and your community and the world safer. And I just want students to see that sacrifice from you, a person who started the Butler Center at the University of Miami, who led by example as a child who didn't even know there was a GI Bill because one hadn't been created yet, who had no path to the future success that you were. And you knew intuitively that you had a duty. And you know what? I think that our university is banking on that same spirit, right? That sense of purpose, that sense of looking at an entire life in front of you and how it can unfold. And we're not asking them to carry an M1. We're not asking them to go down the rope sides of a boat. We're just asking them to wear a mask, to social distance, to wash their hands, and to follow the protocols of the university. And I just want you in your World War II, with your World War II veteran authority, to tell the 17-year-olds and the 18. I was 17 when I landed on campus back in 82. I want you to, in the fall of 82, I want you to tell every 17-year-old who's coming to our campus now that, and you speak with authority, that it's their turn to face the challenge.
Well, I felt very strongly about getting involved in this war to end all wars. Unfortunately, my generation didn't accomplish that. But we had some wonderful leaders in those days. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in office for four terms, elected for 4 terms. He died in April of 1945 when I was in Brisbane, Australia. Well, I was so stunned by that. I said a silent prayer as soon as I learned of that for him and to support Harry S. Truman, who was taking his place. Little did I realize that 8.5 years after that, I would be meeting with President Truman in his office in Kansas City, Missouri, with 200 international students. But this leadership, President Roosevelt said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And the American people were behind him 100%. There was no job shortage. Everybody could get a job because the younger people were in the military and the older people were taking up jobs that they had occupied. It seems to me that it was so important that we have this leadership from the top to convey a spirit and attitude that people could believe in. And I don't think we have that today. Unfortunately, we get so many mixed signals and so many statements that are not true and all this, that people just don't know what to believe. But to these young people today going through this, I was through World War II and I've been through another war, COVID-19 virus war. These young people must do what they're instructed to do. There's a spirit there of cooperation and leadership. You have to wear masks. You have to have your social distance. You must rely upon the leadership of the university. And frankly, if you can't do that, you should not be at the university. It's not much to ask you compared to being involved in World War II and being faced with combat and ships on the high sea and not knowing where you're going to be from one day to the next, whether you're going to be alive the next day. You just marched ahead and did what you were inspired to do and believed that this country was a great country and it needed your help and support, and I was there to do that. And this is what the young people should get behind today. There's no question about it. It's not an awful lot to ask, very frankly.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I think we as a university do have a duty, just like you had a duty to serve, a duty that you responded to internally. I think the university has a duty to educate. And at a global stage, what a missed opportunity for us if we were just to walk away from this moment and get ready to begin teaching when the problem was solved. That would be an easy way out. And I think what we're seeing here is we're basically leaning in and we're asking the students to be part of the solution because we trust them. We trust and believe in them that they will take this seriously, because every major challenge, whether it's fighting.
Well, you've got a great leader in President Frank. And I'm very proud of the University of Miami and what it's accomplished to date. And I think that if people get behind the president and do what they set forth for everyone to do, that you're going to come out of this okay. But you can't, I know it's easy for the young people to say, well, it's not going to bother me. I'm 18 years old or 19 years old, and I'm strong and healthy and so on. But the viruses can attack anybody, old people like me, young people, children, and it's nothing to fool around with.
People with high blood pressure like me, absolutely. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make, that 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds have risen to the occasion, whether it's fighting for civil rights or fighting against fascist regimes. It's always been young people. It's the people who go and effectuate change. And now the change we need to make is not to think of, ourselves in our world and what impacts us as teenagers or young men and women, but to see it in the context of our broader society, because it is a formative time for us. And what students learn now, what you learned in an island in the Pacific, is what's going to give you the formation to lead and grow and be the person you become. So it is
these young people, it's their world today, and they have every opportunity to make it better and greater. And these steps are very necessary for them to take to get to where they want to go. Education is power, as I said before. And goodness gracious, they're very fortunate to be able to have this opportunity for a university education, and make the most of it, and stay healthy and happy.
Yeah. The possibilities are endless, and also there's also truth here. Like the university is going to be transparent about the pandemic. It's going to be transparent about the infection rates. That's how they get to react and respond. And if they have to clear a dorm or clear a building, they will. We're also, there are risks abound. There's the virus is with us. It hasn't gone away. And there's going to be testing, lots of testing, expensive testing that the university is going to conduct. And we can't get a sense of complacency, as the president said this morning, as President Frank said this morning in the conversation with the faculty. I mean, none of this is easy. These are among the hardest things to solve. But I think what I was moved by in his conversation to us, the faculty, this morning, is what I was moved by when I spoke to you a week ago today, when you and I had our conversation. And that is that we believe that all of us have a role to support and care and love one another. The university was instrumental in my formation, the man I am today, especially the leadership that I did. We talked a lot about volunteerism and the work that happens outside the classroom. And on August 17th, when kids come back to campus, and not all of them will, not all of them can, but when they do, they're going to have another laboratory for learning, for civic education, for thinking beyond themselves and for problem solving, and to sacrifice a little bit, to make some adjustments, to do things that they wouldn't have otherwise had to do. But it's a whole lot more than getting rot feet and getting shot up by snipers on our way to a latrine in a mosquito-infested island, very, very far away from home, especially a rural home, because you had just been out a year in high school. You lived a very sheltered, sort of idyllic life for 16 years. Then 1 year you were off in a big city, and then you're here with a rifle in your hand. Okay, so if Dr. Butler, the founder of the Dr. Butler Center, could do it before he had his doctorate degrees and all this wisdom and knowledge, then any University of Miami student coming in can certainly follow in the footsteps of one of the members of the greatest ever generation, the generation that liberated, the generation that fought for us in World War II. And I just wanted to, again, Dr. Butler, express my gratitude to you, for all you've done, and for a life well lived, and and even here, we both live in the same village. I live in Palmetto Bay as well. But right here from our homes, we are able to still convey this inspiring, sense of purpose, right, to yet a new generation of hurricanes, of
Well,
University.
it's a great university. It's come a long, long way in its 94 years, same age as I am in terms of when classes were first opened. And I'd love to be around when they celebrate the 100th anniversary just to see how they do it. And but we'll see about that as time goes on.
I get a strong, solid sense you did. Maybe all that early swimming and good health along the way has gotten you this far.
Well, the other thing I'm doing right now is I've written 2 books and published 2 books, and I'm writing my 3rd book. I've written all the stories. This one is about my experiences as a youth, my middle years, and my university years. And it's moving along very nicely. And so I hope by Christmas it will be available. All the proceeds from the book, as was true with the first 2 books, will go to the endowment for the Butler Center. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the center. And I'm so very proud of what these young people are doing, their commitment to helping others and to providing leadership on the campus and in the world. And I would encourage any student at the university to get involved in the Butler Center. I think it will change your life. The center is now 32 years of age. And it's come a long way from the very beginning when we just had a director and a desk and a chair and no budget, to now one that has a director, 2 associate directors, all kinds of students, and over 40 different organizations that work with the Butler Center to help others. So we've come a long way.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. Let's hope that this new generation of Canes, through their work at the Butler Center of the University, keep on making us proud. Thanks so much, Dr. Butler. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. And
again. See you later.
go Canes.
Go Canes.